One. All right, we finally worked out the bugs here.
We can thank the storm for that one last night.
No, we're still wringing out all the water from everything that happened yesterday. Good morning, everyone. I want to welcome everybody who is watching us on this Wednesday morning here for our week. Well, not weekly yet. We're bi-weekly.
Still every other week.
We're intermittently Wednesdays, every other Wednesday.
Every other Wednesday.
For our All's in This Together program, we got a great one today. We got a full house, actually, today. I don't think we've had this many people here for a while. We'll get to introductions in just a little bit. But again, Mindy, good morning.
Yeah, good morning, Jerry. And I think both you and I are going to really love today's topic because both of us have worked in government before. Yeah. So this one is kind of near and dear to our hearts because when it comes to advocating for a cause, that's something that you and I care very deeply about. So it's a good show. We're so happy for everybody who's tuned in. And of course, for those who cannot tune in, make sure that you share the word and just let everyone know that these always live on our YouTube channel and Facebook channel, and anybody can, of course, go to it and see it anytime they'd like to.
And someone's calling you.
Yes, someone is calling me.
Don't they know you're busy?
I know.
Jeez. But yeah, we got a great, when you talk about government, it's not always. It's not an easy process,
no.
And because the process is an interesting one, and we're going to get into all that. But here we are again. We're drying out. We had some issues here with some of the technology. It always happens when the rain hits. And,
always.
And yes, yesterday we had 4 inches of rain here at the station. I was at my house. I'm one of those weather nerds that actually has a rain gauge out there. I had 4.5 inches of rain. And I was looking on Facebook, and I saw some people in other parts of town. That's 7 inches of rain on their rain gauge. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's nice to. I kind of forgot what rain looked like.
The parts of Laredo that are a little closer to the Corpus area, that kind of part of town, is where they saw a lot of rain.
And we get to thank Tropical Storm Harry for all of it. Harold, but we call him Harry here.
We call him Harry because we used to have a Harry.
We used to have a Harry
co-anchor. Yeah, I actually texted him yesterday and said, Harry, I knew you were coming back to Laredo. Right. It was inevitable. So he was laughing at that.
All right. Well, let me bring in 2 out of our 3 guests, and then I'll bring our third guest in here in just a bit. But I want to welcome Joe Arciniega and Didi Diaz. Joe is the National Board Member for the Alzheimer's and Alzheimer's Advocate. Hold on, let me get out of here. There he is. And Didi is also an Alzheimer's Advocate. I want to welcome the 2 of you. Thanks for being here this morning.
Thank you, Jerry.
Thanks for having us.
And also joining us, and it's Chelsea. Chelsea, you're in Austin, aren't you?
San Antonio.
San Antonio. That's awesome.
Yeah.
and I guess I wanted to say Austin because you spent a lot of time in Austin, right? And I think the last time we talked, you were in legislative session or something to that effect, and I think that's why I just kind of associated you with Austin.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, all right. Well, let's going to go ahead and get started with this. Joe, I kind of want to start with you. I know you've been involved with the Alzheimer's Association forever and a day. It seems. And,
it feels like forever sometimes. But,
and I will go as far as say is I sometimes I feel, Joe, you are the poster child for Alzheimer's in our community. That's because you're very involved, and you are everywhere. You're like Visa. You're everywhere you need to be. You're like a Visa. But you've been so involved with the Alzheimer's Association. What keeps you going with Alzheimer's?
Well, it feels like forever. It hasn't been. It's actually been 8 years and 8 months since my father passed away in 2015, and my advocacy and on some days my activism began then. So it's what has fueled me very, very strongly in the initial years of my work as both an advocate and then ultimately as a member of the governing board, the National Alzheimer's Association. But what started to get me going was the gaps in help and information and support that was available for Laredoans. Ultimately, my father was a San Antonian, but I had to bring him to Laredo for his last 7 months of life, and he passed away here in Laredo. And I had a front row seat to the deficits in what we had available 8 years and 8 months ago. So that really has started to drive me. And as the statistics started to get worse, as I started to see it, even anecdotally in my visits with who I call our constituents throughout the city, that is what has propelled me much more aggressively toward doing something and finding ways to connect the city leaders and the state and federal leaders to this problem.
Wow. You know, you were your dad's caretaker.
Yes.
So you clearly went through, you know, everything that you go through when you're caring for somebody, but that was 8 years ago.
Yes.
And we've come a long way
Yes.
in the 8 years, and you have pretty much seen it firsthand.
Yes, it's been an exciting, certainly an exciting last 5 years, and the most exciting last 12 months. Literally in the last 12 months, we had 2 drugs that actually treat the underlying biology of Alzheimer's disease come forward, get approved by FDA, and one of them get approved for coverage by Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, and which we worked very hard to get them to do that. So that's been particularly exciting to see as something available to help people with early onset Alzheimer's to either forestall it, perhaps even stop it. We need more time with those drugs. We're literally talking about months old of having that state going. The other thing that's been real exciting to see over literally the last 3 months is we developed a relationship with the UT Research and Education Center at Laredo. With the people there, you know, the building that's there on right next, in between Laredo Medical Center and the other extended care hospital. We've had finally now a place to have support groups held, educational series held, and on September 21st, we're going to have a caregivers conference that day on a Thursday. So those are major advances that I am seeing can help people of Laredo.
You know, everything that you've just said, like you said, is all in the last 12 months. That's crazy. The most mind-blowing is the approval for the coverage of the medication, because that was just, speaking of mind-blowing, that was mind-blowing that they were not approved.
Right.
You know, and that goes back to what we're talking about today, the strength of voices from advocates like yourself and Dee Dee and Chelsea, of course, who are just, you know, boots to the ground trying to convince legislators of the importance of getting medication covered and so much more.
Yes.
So
Dee Dee, talk to us about your story and how you were approaching this advocacy and what kind of got you to want to be an advocate to begin with.
Well, it started about a year ago. Joe approached me. He had heard that my mother had developed Alzheimer's dementia. And yes, I was struggling. You know, I was the primary caregiver at the time, and I was going through a lot. So he reached out to me and he goes, "Hey, we've got this group here that does advocacy. They actually go and they try to reach out. They're kind of like the voice in the halls of Congress and in our state legislatures that reach out to get some help, some funding for caregivers and actually the people who are suffering from this disease." So, you know, at first I was hesitant because I thought, you know, I don't have any experience. You know, I'm going to go to the halls of Congress and appeal to, these people. I'm not a public speaker. But he assured me that anybody could do this. And it's been an exciting year. When we went to D.C. in March and to the AIM, it was a convention, a conference where Joe is president, and he spoke, and it was amazing to see Laredo represented the way it was, you know, and as president of the board and as speaker there, you know, it was just, I was so proud of Laredo and proud to be a part of it. I was moved to tears, because people were giving their stories, their testimonials, people with Alzheimer's who are currently suffering with this disease. So we heard their testimony. I was touched. You'd look around and everybody was in tears hearing their stories. How could someone not be moved to help with this and get involved? Yeah. So it was exciting. We went to a rally. It was the first time rally.
First rally in front of the White House.
Yes.
Wow.
So that was exciting. I never saw myself in a rally in front of the White House. So I can tell you it's been an exciting year. I want to continue with this, and I would encourage anybody else who has family members, loved ones, friends, and even if you don't, it's such a great cause. It's something, you're looking for something to make a difference in this world. Well, here's something you can do. Yeah. So anyway, my mother does have dementia, and she was diagnosed about 2 years ago. And this is a beautiful woman, educated. She taught for 30-something years, went to law school at the age of 50, practiced law for several years, had 7 children. Brilliant woman, was always reading, an avid reader, 3 books at once. She spoke, French, Italian, she was a gift for languages. She just could pick them up brilliant woman. Mm-hmm. And so when I started seeing, the light going out in her, it just, I couldn't believe what was happening. So it happened to anybody.
Yeah, it does not discriminate.
Yeah, she would do crossword puzzles, so, to keep her brain going. And it's just something that could affect anybody, anytime, and any family member. So.
Absolutely. So I would think that the message here is every voice counts, and it doesn't
Exactly.
matter where that voice comes from. It could be a first-time voice like yours, or someone like Joe who's been doing this for quite some time.
Yes.
But every single voice matters, and every story matters.
Well, the reason it matters is because what I keep hearing, and this is encouraging, it's very encouraging. I keep hearing this from our elected leaders at the federal level, at the state level, and even at the local level with the city council and the county, is they are in the business of listening to the constituents. They really are. The problem sometimes is the constituents need to step forward and let themselves be heard. Of course, we want to encourage everyone to vote, right? That's obviously important. But it's not just that. It's also send messages to your member of Congress or to our state senator or to our state representative. We are lucky in Laredo that Henry Cuellar at the federal level, Senator Judith Zaffirini, and Representative Richard Raymond at the state level, they invest in Laredo by their actions. I think a lot of us see that. And they are open, they have all been to a person open to hearing our challenges, hearing what the people in Laredo that are suffering from Alzheimer's and especially the caregivers need. And they have been responsive, from co-sponsoring bills to voting for funding to giving us a platform at City Council like we were just earlier this week to be heard. Yeah. And that's important for the people to speak up and state their needs to our elected officials.
And you bring up a good point. We were just at City Council on Monday a couple of days ago, and again, we don't know when people are going to watch this, but we were at City Council a couple of days ago, and it's amazing how sometimes you just need to go and open that door, and I know sometimes it's, for a lot of people, it's intimidating. And obviously for us, it's difficult because we've been in that forum before, and it comes just very natural for us in many regards. But it can be intimidating. But I will tell you, as a former public official, having people come before you is very powerful.
Yes.
It's very impactful, and we know, and I'll never forget this from grad school when I was working on my master's in government. I remember Professor saying, goes, where there's one person, there's probably 100 behind them. The one person who comes before a public body, there's a multiplier effect because that person doesn't go by themselves. That person goes because there's 100, there's 1,000 people behind them. And so when you get one person, we know there's a lot. When you get 2, there's even more. And then that multiplier starts to, you start to feel it as a public official. And then you compound that with the good cause.
Exactly.
And it just becomes a no-brainer. And so, I will say this, and we have to obviously, be public about it, is, we went to City Council. We got $5,000 out of City Council, which was, fantastic. It was more than
wonderful.
It was, I think, more than last year. And it grows from there. And not only because of the advocacy, and which you guys have done an amazing job of laying that foundation, but the cause is so wonderful.
Yeah, sure.
And Joe, you laid out the statistics
Yes.
on Monday,
That
and data and science
Yes.
does not lie.
No. The irony about that, so the statistics you're no doubt referring to, which was front page news all around the country, including our own Laredo Morning Times. We just have released the county by county statistics, and Webb County is tied for first place, a dubious distinction, with El Paso County. 15% of our population above the age of 65 are afflicted with Alzheimer's. And what I shared, we are number 9 in the country of 3,200 and something counties.
I think the national average is 10%.
That's correct.
10%.
We're that much higher.
we're at 15.
Yeah. Yes.
But on top of that, as many of us who have suffered from this, as Dee Dee knows too, for every person with Alzheimer's, there are at least 3 additional family members who are acting in an unpaid caregiver capacity. And that impacts the whole family and everybody. So you're literally adding another 3 people to each of those afflicted with Alzheimer's in Laredo. And the statistics on that are staggering on the number of people that impacts. So we needed to come forward with actions that we have been working on for the past several years, and more dramatically developing over this past year, because the minute these statistics hit news, now everybody knows there isn't just an amorphous 400,000 people in the state of Texas with Alzheimer's. We now know that we have this many people in Webb County and Laredo, as we know.
And I would probably go on to say is the numbers are still low.
Well, I'm going to tell you, yes, and here's why. The thing that I'm seeing a lot of in my meetings with constituents here in Laredo is most of the people I am talking to are under the age of 65 who have concerns about themselves about Alzheimer's, or who have been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and that is called the younger onset Alzheimer's.
Wow.
Those people are not in this statistic yet. The other thing is there's a lot of unreported. In the Hispanic community, unfortunately, we tend to be very private about these matters, and we tend to have difficulty with these things. So there's a lot of unreported cases of Alzheimer's. This is the tip of the iceberg, and as I did share at City Council, this is a tsunami that hasn't even crested in the world, but particularly in Texas, when you consider that Texas has the highest population of African Americans in the United States by number, and the second highest population of Hispanics by number. And Alzheimer's disease impacts Hispanics 1.5 times more than non-Hispanic whites, and 2 times more for African Americans than non-Hispanic whites.
Wow. Well, and you talk about the cult being very private, and I'm going to add that and being a very proud culture also. You know, because there's not a lot of people who want to admit, you know what, I'm starting to forget things, or something's wrong with me, or I don't want to go to the doctor and find out. And so when you compound that, you know, that probably would lead to the idea of the numbers being much lower than, or much higher than what we're actually reporting, and the people not being included in a lot of that number, which is a scary thought to think of, you know. And only because she's been very patient, Chelsea. We have not forgotten about you, Chelsea. And I want to thank you for standing by out of San Antonio, Chelsea. You've been obviously involved in a lot of public policy and a lot of advocacy as well, being on staff with the Alzheimer's Association, and this being obviously your primary duty with them. Talk to me about your role and your history with the advocacy component of what the Alzheimer's Association does.
Yeah, and I will say I'm happy to take a backseat. Our advocates are our spokespeople, and so really my role is to support folks like Joe and Dee Dee, because this is something that's personal to them. These are their stories, these are their lived experiences, and so whenever I get to see them speak and share their stories and connect with folks, it's always brings so much joy to me. But I've been with the association for coming up on 3.5 years. And as Joe mentioned, in the past 12 months, in the past 3 years, in the past 5 years, we have made a lot of progress. And I did want to specifically talk a little bit about what we have been able to accomplish at the state level. And so Joe and Dee Dee were both with us when we take our advocates up to Austin for our advocacy day at the Capitol every 2 years when we're in session. And so this year we had the most advocates attend. We had about 150 advocates from across the state who showed up and met with their elected officials, their state senators, their state representatives. And I'm happy to report that we were able to secure $5.5 million over the biennium, over 2 years, for the Alzheimer's disease program, which is housed in the Texas Department of State Health Services. And so that was our number one priority going into the legislative session at the state level this year. And 5.5 million is a significant increase. Previously, it was funded at 1 million. And then prior to that, it was funded at about $164,000. Wow. And so we've been able to make that progress. Joe, who's been an advocate for years now, has seen that progress. And I think policy is slow for folks. It doesn't move fast enough, but we have been able to gain some traction just because our elected officials are realizing this is not going away. The association is not going away. These advocates are not going away. They're going to continue to make sure it remains a priority, which is why it's so important that we are giving our volunteers and our advocates a platform to share their stories, because their stories matter. And Joe is very great with all the statistics, and those matter too. But when you're able to connect a story with those numbers, there's no stopping folks. And folks are going to want to support because it's something that they can connect with, and then they can see the science behind that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when you hear those personal stories, you know, and you see the anguish and hear what people go through, and just knowing that there's just no cure for this disease, you know, that really motivates folks to step up to the plate, and of course our legislators as well.
Chelsea, I want to follow up, and what is the biggest challenge you face right now as the public policy manager? Obviously, we know that a lot of great things have come out of the legislature. A lot of the great things have come out of the halls of Congress as well. We're seeing a lot of doors open up at the local level as well. But from your perspective, what is the biggest challenge you're facing as a public policy manager?
I think it's really just making sure that this remains top of mind for elected officials. That is one of the biggest challenges, and that's a challenge for any policy area, right? And there's so much going on in the world. And that's why it's so important that we have volunteers that are actively engaging with their elected officials, so that when they say they're going to support something and then they haven't supported it, we can follow up with them and then get them on board. And I will say at the federal level, Congressman Cuellar has been a huge supporter of the association, and he's co-sponsored 2 of our priority bills this session, which are both, one's the NAPA Reauthorization Act and the other is the Alzheimer's Accountability and Investment Act. And both of those bills essentially make sure that Alzheimer's remains a national priority. And so he signed on to them after we came back from DC and after Joe followed up with their office. And so it's just a matter of remaining consistent. And to do that, we need volunteer advocates who are willing to share their story and lend a voice in however they can, whether it's an email, a text alert, dropping by offices. And so just making sure that we are building grassroots efforts and getting as many folks engaged as possible.
Yeah. Let me ask you, a lot of people may, and only because I've heard it from folks, not necessarily regarding this situation, but others, when you say, hey, call your congressman, call your city councilman, or send an email. A lot of people think, well, they're not going to listen to me. That email isn't going to make it. That phone call doesn't matter. What am I going to do? It's just one phone call. But from your perspective, Chelsea, all that does work, right? It's not just a phone call.
Yeah, a phone call and email helps. Any type of action is helping us and helping us move the needle forward. And I think offices are receptive. Joe mentioned the senators, Afrini, as well as Rep. Raymond Pena. They are receptive because often when we're engaging with offices, a staff person or even the elected official has a personal connection to the disease. And so It's just a matter of educating and bringing awareness to this and saying, hey, here's how you can support this. And this is what it will look like for your constituents. And so every action matters. I know it sounds like real corny, but it really does.
really
and
does.
so we've made great progress in the past 10 plus years. We've increased research funding 7-fold. So we have this beautiful graph that really highlights just how much each action has helped us over the course of the past decade. And at the National Institutes of Health, we've surpassed the 3.7 billion mark. And
Wow.
2011, when we were getting started, it was 448 million that was being allocated for Alzheimer's and dementia-related research funding. And so that graph, I always love to highlight it. I wish I could honestly put it in my background because it really shows the work that is happening. And we have folks in Laredo doing this. We have folks throughout the state as well as throughout the nation. So you're joining a network of folks who are passionate and committed to this cause. And so there's no denying the thousands of folks who are our advocates, and every voice matters. So.
And if you think about it, every call, every email is a possible vote, right? So
Yeah.
from an elected official perspective, hey, you know what? That could be something I need 4 years down the road.
Absolutely.
I want to get back to you, Joe. You've obviously dealt with a lot of elected officials as well, especially being in the position that you're in. You represent Congressional District 28,
Yes.
Which is a pretty large area.
Yes, it sure is.
I'm sure you've traveled that as well.
Yes.
Headed up to San Antonio and
Yep.
and rural parts of South Texas as well. What has been your experience? I know we've talked about the local officials here in Webb County, and we all know that Senator Zaffarini is a great friend of the Alzheimer's Association.
Yes,
So
she is.
is Representative Raymond as well, Congressman Cuellar. I mean, we all know the work they've done. Those aren't the only ones you work with. Is everybody else that you talk to as receptive and as open as the people we have here in Webb?
Yes, and I would include Tracy King as well in that, although it impacts a little differently just based on what his district was, and I know he's moving on. But no, I would really, and we couldn't really hear clearly what Chelsea was saying, but I'm going to assume that she would echo what I would say, which is that the main thing is the organization itself and why it's so important. Things like Walk to End Alzheimer's that funds activities of the organization itself. Things like AIM, people that support the Alzheimer's Impact Movement. Yeah. It's a 501c4, more on the lobbying side. We have people in Laredo that are supporting them as well. Why this is all important is because they support the activities of the staff team that help bridge the regular day-to-day contacts with the staffs of these respective elected officials. They make it real easy, where, Dee Dee was saying, I don't know how I could do it. Well, frankly, I feel like that sometimes too. All I have to do is walk in and tell my story, which I do, but also tell the stories of the constituents that I'm hearing throughout the district. And it's important, that's why it's important for them to be heard. It's important to be able to express that sincerely and factually. And then the elected officials have to deal with the politics of getting bills approved and getting funding approved. And we understand all of that. And sometimes it takes a lot of patience, as I think I heard Chelsea say. It does. However, it is a true collaborative process, and that's how we approach it. We are trying to get them to understand the different ways that the bills that they support, for example, the ENACT Act, for example, which was a successful bill that we got passed last year, and that assured that trials and medical trials included people of color, Hispanics and African Americans in it. Since we are the ones most disproportionately affected, we should be the ones in those trials. So it helped assure that. Or the bill that Senator Zaffarini sponsored, which required training at the state level, training for nursing homes and care facilities that propose to treat Alzheimer's. They now have to be trained, a certain level of training that is required of them. Wow. Or the bill that Representative Raymond supported at the state level, which required training for law enforcement on how to handle those things. So it's not just about raising money for research for the NIH, which we do in Washington, D.C. We've gone from, I think, $600 million million when I joined the cause to now $3.7 billion a year from our federal government for the National Institutes of Health to research a cure. It's also things that touch our sufferers and our constituents on a day-to-day basis. And these elected officials, we just have to be able to explain to them why it's so important for the people in their constituency. And I keep saying it over and over again. We are very fortunate in Laredo, and we have to be, given the increases in the cases in Laredo.
Yeah. You know, I go back to COVID because they came out with the vaccine and the testing so fast. Voices were loud and clear. The demand was there. People were dying left and right. And wow, those scientists and researchers, you know, they did what they needed to do in record time. And I personally compare that to Alzheimer's. You know, it's just taken decades and decades to get where we are today. But I think that through advocacy, personal stories, the fact that the numbers are growing so fast, especially along the border area, that, you know, it is my personal hope and prayers that they start doing that as well, that we get that sense of urgency, because people are dying so fast and more people are getting diagnosed.
And it's those that yell the loudest that get heard.
Exactly.
You know, and that's, you know, and
True.
And people were yelling quite loudly with COVID, you
Yeah.
know, and that's exactly what we have to do. That same type of sense of urgency and demand, you know, for funding so we can get that cure and that first survivor.
You know, and it was exciting to get that extra funding from the state, you know, when we went to Austin. I couldn't hear what Chelsea was saying. And yes, there was a tremendous contribution that was made, but we're still lagging behind the nation. Did she mention that we're how far, like Florida, for example, let's say we're at, what was it, 2.75 million per year. Okay. Florida's at like 44 million a year in funding.
And we have equal number of cases of Alzheimer's, generally equal number in the state of Texas to the state of Florida.
And I think New York was either 25 or 27 million. Yeah. Again, the same percentage population. So, you know,
this is funding at the state level.
At the state level.
So and we're that far behind.
We're that far behind.
Well, having said that, and this is where I compliment the legislature, because it was a very interesting time during that period. We came from way further behind.
Right. Yeah,
so we were at 1 million on the biennium, $500,000 a year, and they moved it up to. We were asking for 10 million on the biennium. We got 5 million on the biennium. We'll take it. We were happy, and we're going to deploy those dollars. We are already doing it in ways that are going to help Texans. But what we are now going to be talking about in the next legislative session in Austin is we need to move significantly from 5 million on the biennium.
Right.
So we'll be prepared with our asks at that time.
Wow.
And our loud voices.
And our loud voices.
And, you know, and the good thing is that at the research level and the medication level, there is so much progress being done. So once they see that the money is being spent well and wisely, and, you know, we just need more, you know, they'll hopefully reach a little deeper into their pockets and give a little bit more. Definitely. So what kind of background? I know we were talking, Dee Dee, that you didn't have any kind of background in advocacy. For folks that are listening right now that are like, I want to be a part of this, you know, what do you tell them as far as they don't have any experience, maybe they're retired, you know, and they're looking for a cause? What can you tell them? How do you get started?
Well, the way you can get started is by going to the AIM. Well, first of all, locally. If you want to do local involvement, we've got our walk committee, and we have a walk November 4th. So, yes, get involved locally at the local level. But if you want to step up and do the national thing, there's a website called AIM, Alzheimer's Impact Movement, and you just have to click on Get Involved, and that's all it takes. Fill out the form and get involved. Get in touch with your local chapter, and that's all it takes. I was a school teacher, retired, you know, and stay-at-home mom most of the time. So again, I didn't have a whole lot of experience. I was an English major, political science minor, but nothing that I was never a public speaker other than speaking to my students in a classroom, which is a whole different story than getting in front of, I couldn't do what Joe does, speaking in front of thousands of people, but I can tell my story. And I think everybody, and that's how everybody kind of calmed me down. It's okay. All you have to do is get out there and tell your story. That's what's going to touch at the heartstrings of the voters, of those that are involved in the legislature, the decision makers.
Right.
So,
let me just say that people always think that when I talk to them about why don't you get involved on the advocacy side, they think, Joe, just like Dee Dee said, and yes, I have spoken in front of a lot of people, but as Dee Dee discovered, these meetings with our legislators are literally in an office. We're sitting across from them closer than we are sitting to you right now. Sometimes it's a staff person by necessity, but many times that staff person is the person you want to talk to and make a connection with, as you well know. So it really is just a conversation with people whose job it is to care about the people whose stories you are telling. Right. And that's all that's necessary. But Dee Dee is right. Let's join us on the walk committee. That's easy to find out. Join us on the walk committee. Then I'll talk to people about, hey, why don't you join us when we go to Austin? We did on April 5th of this year. Why don't you join us? We're just going to go and be a bunch of people wearing purple and walking around the Capitol. And then I actually got Dee Dee to join us in Washington, D.C. at the federal level. Same thing. Put on your purple, Dee Dee, and just come. You're going to be in a room full of advocates with representatives that we know because they're supposed to care about our community. That's all it is. Yeah. Telling your story, you care about it, you want to invest that.
Wow. You bring up a really good point, Joe, in that a lot of the, and you can appreciate this, Mindy, a lot of the advocacy is done with staff, with people who are behind the scenes, and at the time of vote or whatever, it's the staff who does a lot of the legwork.
Absolutely.
Most of the legwork comes from staff, and a lot of times the legislator or the council, whoever it may be, will obviously go talk to staff and be like, okay, where are we at with this? What's the situation?
Right.
Who came to talk? This, that, and the other.
Right.
And really, the time you meet with the legislator or the public official, that really is just more of the formality.
Yes.
At that point.
Right.
And again, I don't want to minimize what they do, but they are so busy.
Yeah.
Obviously, they rely on
the
staff.
Floor and they're
you
voting
used to be
and
a staff member for a member of the Texas legislature and Congress, so you know exactly what we're talking about, and it's a lot less intimidating when you know you're talking to a staff member than who you may have seen on TV a couple of nights before.
Well, I'll tell you a funny story. One of the times we were in Washington, and it was a group of us, and we thought we were going to be meeting with Senator Ted Cruz, and so we walk into this room. We're all sitting there. Everybody was a little nervous, and then the staffer came in. His staffer, and she listened to us. And the interesting thing is, he sent her because she was the one who had the family connection to Alzheimer's, and we were people frequently crying and tearing up in these stories, and so was she. And then she literally got up. I think you were there, Dee Dee.
She gave her story.
She gave her story, but then she made a few phone calls. She said, just wait here. And then we all went over to Ted Cruz's office, and he came out because she said, I want you to meet these people. And he did. And he came out and spent some time with all of the advocates that were in the hallway. People were jazzed to see the senator. And those are, but you're right. Those are the connections, because this is a human condition. This is a human to human connection that we have to make. And this is a purple issue. It is neither red nor blue, as we say. There are people on both sides of the aisle politically who are supporting us significantly in Congress at the U.S. level and at the state level. So we have a story to tell. It's not that hard to make a connection with people. And so that's what we're looking for, more people from the community to step up and help us.
And yeah, you're right. And Alzheimer's obviously doesn't affect blue people or red people anymore. No. It discriminates in a bipartisan manner. And I got to tell you a story. It's funny. You bring up Ted Cruz. You want to talk about the effectiveness of talking to your legislators. I mean, here you are, a U.S. Senator, right? I was, in my previous job, we were in a lobbying trip to Washington, D.C. And I think most people here in this room will know where the Capitol Grill is in Washington, D.C. And so we were having dinner at the Capitol Grill. our group, and again, this was before I was working here. We were lobbying, and we're there at the Capitol Grill having a great dinner. Great place to go eat.
It's
by the way.
great. I love it.
And all of a sudden, somebody from our group says, "Hey, there's Ted Cruz over there." And this was right before he announced he was running for president. And so we're looking, and he goes, "Yeah, it is Ted Cruz. That's Ted Cruz. It's Ted Cruz." And so everybody's like, "Well, what do we do? What do you mean, what do we do? It's Ted Cruz, right?" And so one of our group gets up, "You know what? Screw it. I'm a constituent." So he goes to Ted Cruz's table. Well, a couple minutes later, here he comes back with Ted Cruz. And comes to our table, and I'll never forget this. And you want to talk about advocacy? This is where he goes. "I don't usually do this for any table, but when I found out it was a group of people from Texas, I knew I had to come."
Good.
And that just kind of gives you an insight into the mentality of an elected official, and they listen to their constituents,
Yeah, right.
And that just how important that is. Because no one asked him to come over, but he knew the value of people from Texas.
Definitely.
They vote for him.
Right.
Right.
That's the way it works.
And everybody does. Everybody sees that value. And that's why the advocacy is just so important. I think people get intimidated, but they don't realize the power they have when they go to see the people in power, because the people in power have the power because of those people.
Exactly.
And once you start seeing it from that perspective, it just kind of makes the thing less intimidating.
Absolutely.
And I don't know if I'm. I mean, do you agree with me on that?
I do, 100%. I have I've had a very successful relationship with our elected officials. I've been very vocal about my support for these current elected officials because I say they care about Laredo. I don't think anybody can or say that they aren't paying attention to Laredo, and we need to be paid attention to.
Yeah.
And it's fortunate for us that they have their home bases in Laredo. And so I agree with you.
Well, and the other thing that we need to realize also is Laredo's not the sleepy little town of 50,000 people it was before.
No.
We are the epicenter of trade. We are the center of international commerce.
Right.
We have millions of dollars, billions of dollars that come through this community. We're a community of over 300,000 people.
Yes.
10th largest city in the state of Texas. We have power in this city.
Definitely.
And I think people don't think that. I think people don't think so. I don't think people appreciate sometimes we have power in this city.
Right.
And when we mobilize the right way behind the right people, the two of you and everybody else, wow, amazing things happen. And I see Chelsea nodding her head. And I see, you know that, Chelsea, and that is just powerful, a powerful thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think that the numbers that you came out with also, Joe, are going to make our voices so much louder, because now we've got, unfortunately, we need the leverage. This isn't the leverage that, we're proud of, but it's reality. And when we go and advocate either at the state level or at the federal level and say, Webb County is tied for first with El Paso County. Right. We are the 9th county in the entire nation. That's pretty strong.
And that's one thing we don't want to be winning in.
No.
We don't want to win there.
No.
Exactly.
Well, and not only that, we are extra challenged because of our medical infrastructure that we are don't have as well as we need to have. We have an underserved population, and we have a population that is needy financially. So it isn't as easy for everyone and for many to just drive to San Antonio to go get their diagnosis with a neurologist. It is not as easy once the drugs are available for someone who is underprivileged to spend the time that they need to spend for treatment. So we have to be doing more in this community, or the trials themselves.
Exactly.
Yeah, we have to be doing more in this community. That's really the bottom line, and that makes advocacy extra important at the federal level and at the state level, and even, as we have found out, at the local level, to help fund programs to touch the people suffering.
Absolutely. We're very blessed that we've got the UT Health Science Center
Absolutely.
coming into town and helping with the diagnosis through their program.
Right.
And with the neurologist who comes down, because without those folks, we're not doing well in
We're
the
in trouble.
neurology department. I think
No.
we have one, maybe two.
We have two,
neurologists
so
in town,
I'm
so-
meeting anyone who is even touching that right now. So I'm happy to report we have more than one, but what I'm happier to report is we have the attention from the CEOs from both Doctors Hospital and Laredo Medical Center.
Awesome.
And they are taking our meetings right now. They understand the urgency here, but they understand that we have challenges in medical service here in Laredo.
Yeah,
All
definitely.
right, well, time flies when you're having
Oh,
a
I
great
know.
conversation.
I'm telling you, this
all right,
is one of our favorite topics.
It really is, and I'm gonna go back to Chelsea here, and just kind of as a closing, Chelsea, from your perspective, one last final pitch to our people who are listening. What can they do to get involved as it pertains to what you do in San Antonio for the association?
Yeah, we have a couple options. The first option, you can take action in as little as 1 minute, I think. And if you'd like to take action today, you can text AIMWALK, AIMWALK, to 52886. And this will allow you to send an email or a tweet to your member of Congress asking them to support an increase in research funding. As we mentioned earlier,
Can you give that one again? Give it once again, Chelsea.
It's AIMWALK, AIMWALK, to 52886.
52886. AIM walk. Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Proceed.
So that's the first way you can take action. And then Joe and Dee Dee did a great job of reaching out to folks, asking them to join our efforts. And if you want to learn more, I encourage you to visit allsimpact.org/volunteer. I have already put that website in the comment section. But again, it's allsimpact.org/volunteer. And you can learn about ways for you to take action in your own community and join our advocacy team.
Perfect.
Awesome. Chelsea, thank you so much. And I kind of want to come back to Joe. What can people do if they want to reach out to you? I mean, can people call you and reach out to you if they want to become advocates?
Absolutely. I've often said it. I keep saying that. My wife keeps telling me, stop doing that. But you can find me on Facebook. I'm also on Twitter.
Find you anywhere.
Yeah, you can find me easily. And I love being contacted, and I am frequently contacted from people who are interested in joining our cause. Look me up on Facebook, Joe Arciniaga, also on Twitter at Joe Arson. And really, the easiest way to do it is on November 4th. Come out and join us at WALK. It's at TAMIU, first thing in the morning, I think 9 a.m. But register in advance. Go to the website for alz.org and find WALK. And September 21st, we are going to be having a caregivers conference. You need to register for it. If you or your loved ones need this attention, and it's going to be local resources who will be talking about resources for Laredoans, caregivers, and the afflicted that are suffering. So come out and find us. You can find us. We're pretty visible, but certainly you can always Facebook friend me and check me out on Twitter. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan. You know, before we wrap up, I do want to mention that we have been in talks with the county, and they've been really supportive with third-party funding proposals. We're just texting back and forth with the county, and we did submit an application.
Yep.
Things are looking good. They are wanting to support us. So that is an ongoing conversation that we're having, and hopefully in the next few weeks or so, we'll be able to make an announcement with them.
And use this opportunity, speaking of advocacy,
Right.
contact your county commissioners.
Yes.
Definitely.
Call your county commissioners, tell them that there is a third-party application
Right
for the
now.
Alzheimer's Association sitting in front of them before the budget goes through,
Right.
and to vote favorably on that application. And you want to talk about advocacy? Hey, you know what? These are the guys that go to the same places you go have coffee. These are the guys that are ask you to put those picket signs, those election signs in front of your house and business every 2 to 4 years. So call them. Tell them that you support the Alzheimer's Association.
And that we
Tell
need
them
it.
you support the mission. Tell them you support the goals. Tell them your story.
Mm-hmm.
Tell them if you are someone who has gone through the disease with a loved one or are going through it, call them. Tell them how important this is.
We need to find a cure.
we need to find a cure.
Absolutely.
And you know, you hate to really sound cliche-ish, but you know, Chelsea talked about it, but every dollar does help. I mean, because a dollar here, a dollar there, you know, before you know it, you're talking about billions of dollars.
Yep.
Exactly.
And we are at that point where 2 drugs, you know, we're looking at a third one.
Looking at a third one coming in.
And at some point, that next drug is the one that, okay, finally, you know what?
Yes.
People are gonna live longer.
Yeah.
People are going to enjoy those moments with their families longer. People are going to be able to just enjoy life longer.
We want people to get involved with
Yeah.
our vision of a world without Alzheimer's and dementia. I mean, that's the goal, the ultimate goal. And I
Yeah.
think we can all get on board with that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
All right. So I think, wow. How do you come down off that?
I know.
How do you come off of that? But again, Joe, good point. Alzheimer's Walk is November the 4th. We still have opportunities for people to sign up and
sponsor. We're
and
still looking for
sponsor.
sponsors
Okay.
for that.
And it's not too late to get sponsor logo.
It
on
is
the
not too
t-shirts.
late.
Joe,
Okay.
Joe already found a loophole for that.
Yeah. We're going to get it. Not too late for
Not
that.
too late for that. It is free to create a team. You do not have to pay anything. We love the moral support. We love all kinds of support. So just sign up if you are able. Then at that point to raise $10, $20, $50, $100, whatever it is you can raise. Hey, you know, get 10 members and put in $10 a pop. And you know, you've made a great impact to the Alzheimer's Association. But that is November 4th at TAMU.
That's right. And can I just add that we have confirmed, and I keep confirming it, the money that's raised at Alzheimer's Walk, it stays in Laredo. It's for Laredo programs. If anything, the Alzheimer's Association of San Antonio and South Texas chapter is somewhat a little right now disproportionately allocating resources to Laredo because we're a loud group of people here, justifiably so now with the statistics.
Yeah.
So it does. The money goes to the programs that they are putting on, the caregivers conference, the support group, the education series that are all being held at the UT Center at Laredo. And the UT Center at Laredo is generously donating the use of their facilities, and we are part of their family now. So
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're excited about
Yeah.
that.
It's fantastic. All right. Again, get your team set up. If you want to become a sponsor, it's a great organization to put your business on. A lot of people are going to see it. A lot of people. I think, what did we have last year at Walk?
I think we had about 700.
700. That's
Yeah,
a lot of people.
yeah, it's a lot of people, and we want to have 1,000 this year. So
I know that
so
that
we're
is your
shooting
goal.
for it. That's my goal. 1,000
we
people.
are hoping to push that.
Come on
that
out.
1,000,
It's
that
gorgeous.
1,000 mark, and we're going to be pushing it a lot harder here
Yeah.
to get closer to November the 4th. But it would be great to have the numbers before, you know.
Yeah.
You kind of want to win the game in the third quarter, not in
You
the last
bet.
minute, the last couple of seconds. That's for
You bet, Jared.
That's for sure. Joe, Dee Dee, I want to thank you so much for being here this morning. I want to
Thank
thank you
you.
for all the work that you all do. You know, us here, we are the tip of the iceberg, but the Alzheimer's Association, there's so many people who aren't in front of the camera who do so much work for the Alzheimer's Association, and so we want to thank them too as well.
Well, can I also just close on my end with saying I thank the two of you and KGNS for allocating this event and supporting us the way you have, certainly over the last 2 years and in the years to come. It is an important partnership that we have with KGNS, and you are doing an important service to the city of Laredo, and I thank you for that.
No, thank
Joe.
you.
Appreciate it. It's a
Chelsea,
labor of love.
thank you for what you do at the state level. I know sometimes, especially every 2 years, you probably want to pull your hair out, but everything that you guys are doing there is certainly making a difference. And so every little bit helps in the aggregate. It really starts to add up. All right, that is going to do it for us here this morning for our All's in This Together program. Get engaged, get involved, and let's make some great things happen.
That's right.
Some
Because
noise.
remember,
Make
we
some
are
noise.
alls in this together.
All right,
So,
we'll see you. Are we going to be here next week?
I think it's the following week.
We're back in 2 weeks, so
Yes.
we have a date in 2 weeks. We'll see you back here, and hopefully we won't have a shower before that, you know, kind of zaps out all of our equipment. But until that's going to do it for us.
Yeah.
We'll see you.
Thank you,
Bye.
everybody. Bye.
Thank you.